Hey guys, quick video for our odd stuff in Japan playlist, and this is going to be random odd stuff from Japan that we can't show you. So usually on the odd stuff in Japan playlist we show you these things, don't we? There's no shortage of them either, is there? However, there are some odd things from Japan that we can't show you for various reasons, mainly because of YouTube. Mainly because YouTube has become so difficult to, avoid dramas. So for example, we'd like to show you some images of some of the young people that we know and a couple of the odd things that they do, but we just don't want to take the risk because YouTube are just so we can get in so much trouble with YouTube through totally innocent stuff that they perceive differently, right? So as you'll realize when you hear some of these things, you know, oh yeah, you can't really show that on YouTube these days. We could show it on Dailymotion, our Dailymotion channel, and have no trouble at all because Dailymotion is actually a French-owned company, and they don't have the sort of the emotional reactions to things that YouTube seem to. But anyway, let's get into it. So we'll start with the weird images first because there's a couple of things that when we describe them to you, you might get some pretty disturbing images. So we'll do them first, and then we'll do some other things after that that will clear out those disgusting images to start with. So one of the first ones is boys crawling on their mothers, right? It just seems to be a thing that amongst our friends and family and just other people that we know, and just when we're out in public, we see it all the time. Just this strange thing with boys that are way too old to be crawling on their mothers. But you know, like 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kids, 11-year-old boys, or 8-year-old boys. I mean, there's examples of all these in my head, right? Disturbingly. But just all over their mothers. Sitting there with their mothers and touching them and pulling on their arms and climbing on their backs and just really, really physical with their mothers, you know? And there is a thing in Japan, they say mama complex, talking about boys that have these mother complexes and when they get older, you know. And you can really see it. You can really see it in these strange connections between these boys and their mothers, you know. It's really disturbing. We actually had a family member recently, a young family member recently who was doing it to his mother, and I actually asked him to stop. I said, can you stop that? It's really bothering me, you know. It's really annoying. Weird. And we actually know a guy who's a dentist, and so he'd be in his late 30s probably, and he can't seem to stop touching his mother. He'll sit next to his mother talking to us, and while he's doing it, she'll say something and he'll sort of touch her on the head, or he'll sort of pull on her arm, or he just seems to be constantly touching her. So anyway, that's more than enough of that. Always with topics like that, they sound so bizarre. It's always interesting to get feedback because a lot of our viewers are actually in Japan, and it's really interesting to get feedback on things like this, you know, because sometimes it's like, is it just me? Is it just me noticing this, or is this actually a thing? And it's always interesting to get feedback from other people who live in Japan and go, yeah, that thing. Yeah, that's a thing, you know? So it's interesting. It's interesting. Hopefully at least one other person will have noticed that, otherwise it leaves me feeling a bit weird. So that's one weird image. Here's another one for you. Warm toilet seats. Now we've covered this one before, the toilet seats. Sometimes the old style, they'll have just like a material cloth cover on the toilet seat to make it a bit warmer. Or the more modern ones, of course, are electrically heated. So they have, like the washlets have warm toilet seats, and there's actually a setting on the toilet to set the temperature. And so at first, when you first come to Japan, the warm toilet seat's a bit disturbing, right? Because in a lot of countries, the only time the seat's warm is if someone's just got off it, right? But in winter, you know, once you get used to it, in winter it's a good thing, you know, when it's freezing temperatures and really, really cold, and you go in the bathroom, oh, it's really cold, and you sit down and the seat's warm. Once you get used to it, it's actually quite a good thing. However, it's currently summer and today's 37 degrees, so it's really, really hot, and the toilet seats are still heated, right? So really the last thing you want on a 37-degree day is to sit down on a warm toilet seat, and most of them are still left at the temperature they were set for winter, which is just, You don't need that, do you? You know? So anyway, that's the two most disgusting images for you. Sorry about that. Got them out of the way first. There's a crazy driver for you. A lot of drivers, actually while we're on that, if you guys didn't see it, that guy was actually turning to our right, but first he came right over to our left onto our lane and then went really wide around the corner, right? That's really common here. They drive around in these little cars, some of them, but they drive them like they're a bus. So when they corner, sometimes the street they're going into is a bit narrow, that sort of half explains it, but way too much, like that guy right over our side of the road and then take it really wide like they're driving a bus. And we'll often see at corners like this when we're going around the corner. They'll do the same thing. Instead of just going around the corner, they go really wide to the right first and then go to the left. And you think, what do you think you're driving there? Some little K car, and they drive it like they're driving a truck or a bus or something, you know? So there you go, there's a random odd thing. This is how the odd things come up. They come up right in front of you, right? It's not hard to find these. They're constantly presenting themselves. So, okay, so we'll move on. The warm toilet seat in summer, okay? Why? That's just what they do, right? So, the next one is hot clothes. So, it's really common to see school kids, and girls in particular, and they'll be wearing vests. Now, we saw one yesterday, one of our friends, and friends of the family, right? And she's turned up in her school uniform, and she had a white woolen vest over the top of her shirt. So she had a white blouse on and then a white woolen vest. Woolen, like a woolen jumper without sleeves, right? And she's turned up and oh, how are you? And, oh, atsui desu ne, she said, right? It's hot, isn't it? Right? It's like, well, you're wearing a wool vest. And we see that all the time. You'll see them walk down the street, girls, you know, schoolgirls, bunches of them, with their wool vests on, you know, or full-on wool sweaters sometimes, and it's 36 or 37 degrees. And I said to her yesterday, she said, "Atsui desu ne," and I said, "Why are you wearing that vest?" And she said, "Oh," and I said, "You're not cold, no?" And oh, just everyone does, you know. It's a futsu, she said, futsu. It's normal, right? And it's a fashion thing. We've actually asked other kids about it before. And it's a fashion thing. The girls think that wearing these vests looks better than just wearing the blouse. There could be an aspect of modesty to it as well. Don't know about that. No one's ever actually admitted to that. But it's just this fashion thing, basically. It's a fashion thing. So wearing wool vests in 37-degree heat for fashion, right? Which leads to another one that we see all the time, and that's dudes wearing knit boshi, they call it, like a beanie, whatever you guys call it in your countries, a woolen cap, you know, that you normally wear in winter, you know, the soft woolen cap that you pull down. Beanies we call them in Australia. I don't know what you guys call them. Knit boshi, they call them in Japan. It's a woolen cap, and you see guys wearing them on days like today as well, you know. What are you doing? Which leads to the next odd thing. So it never ends, does it? Leads to the next odd thing, which is the dudes wearing caps, like baseball caps, inside at night. And there's this sort of genre of guy. You sort of know when you see these guys, you see their baseball cap on and their clothes, and you sort of know what their car's going to look like. You know, it's this particular style of dude in Japan. And so as if a baseball cap at night is impractical, then they turn it around backwards. And look, we know these things aren't unique to Japan. We know that. None of our videos are unique to Japan. It's just what we see in Japan. So what we see is dudes with their baseball cap on backwards in restaurants, in family restaurants, at 8 o'clock at night. It's like, why are you wearing... It's obviously purely fashion, isn't it? Purely fashion, you know. Oh yeah, just missed one. Back up a little bit. Back up a little bit to the girls wearing their wool vests. At the same time, in winter, so in summer they come in, they go, "Oh, atsui, and they're wearing a woolen vest in 37-degree heat. In winter, they'll come in and say, "Oh, samui, it's cold," and they'll be wearing like heavy coats and stuff from the waist up, and you know, and the wool cap and all the other stuff, and they'll be all warm, and a short skirt with their legs hanging out, right? And the same thing, they turn up and they go, "Oh, samui," and you say, well, look at your legs. You know, you're walking around, it's snowing outside, literally snowing outside, and there's a wind blowing, and it's a big chill factor, and it's freezing cold, and you're walking around with bare legs. Maybe socks up to the knees or something, and really short skirt, you know. Same thing, purely for fashion. But fair to put it in the odd things, don't you think? Right. A lot of fashion's odd, isn't it? Everywhere in the world, really. Oh, look, yeah. If you want odd stuff in Japan, watch Japanese TV, right? I mean, at first, when you first come to Japan, Japanese TV is a real novelty, so it's all interesting. The ads are interesting, the game shows, it's all interesting when you first come to Japan. And then slowly, it becomes less and less interesting and more grating and annoying and cringy and, you know, and some of us get to the point, I've got to the point where I don't watch Japanese TV really. You know, occasionally if the family's watching something and I sort of, you know, happen to notice it and it happens to be something, because there are a couple of good things on Japanese TV. Occasionally if there's something good, I'll sit down with them and watch it. But most of the times I tend to have a look at what they're looking at. I don't comment. There's the thing I learned early on. You know, people are watching something on TV, you don't want to be going, oh, that bullshit, you know, that nonsense. Obviously that's not cool. So usually what happens is I usually look at the screen, see what's on, go, oh yeah, it's one of those things, and just walk away, because, you know, it gets cringy and sort of, I don't know. So a couple of examples of that. They had a survival show on recently. You know the scenario. A guy gets put on an island and he has to fend for himself, right? And I was a bit curious, because I like those sorts of things, because I'm always interested to see what they do and what I do, you know. And there's a couple of those on YouTube that I watch that aren't Japanese, right? And they're sort of interesting to see how people survive, you know. And so there's this Japanese one. I haven't seen a Japanese survive on an island one before. Let's have a look at this, you know. And so I was standing there watching it, because I didn't expect I'd last long. And here he is, and he's out on a boat, and you could see they were shooting it from like 3 or 4 different angles. So there's obviously 3 or 4 camera crews, and there was, you know, they had it got dark, and it was really well lit. So they obviously had big stage lights that they were lighting it with. And so he caught this fish. He looked suspiciously clean and neat. He really did. You know, most of those survival shows, they usually end up looking pretty crappy. He looked really clean and neat. It was really suspicious. And then he's caught his fish. He's gone out and he's caught his fish that looked suspiciously dead when he caught it. But anyway, we won't worry about that. And then he's made a fire, and he's cooking his fish over the fire with his white gloves on. And we've showed you before the white gloves, the white cotton gloves that they sell at the home centres, and that everyone here uses whenever they do any sort of manual work or dirty work or barbecues. That's classically what they use when they do barbecues in Japan. Usually the guys put on the white cotton gloves when they're doing a barbecue. And here he is on the beach, you know, survival, and here he is cooking his fish on the fire with his white cotton gloves, clean white cotton gloves on. How classic is that? You know, they couldn't have him being too uncivilized, could they? You know, surviving with his white cotton gloves. So there was that one. What was the other one? Yeah, I wrote here, most Japanese TV is odd. That's true. The binge eating thing. I mean, that's, again, you know, lots of countries have binge eating competitions and things like that, you know. But that's a huge thing here, and they seem to be fascinated with girls that can binge eat. You know, the competition thing. So, you know, the one I saw that was on the other night, I walked past, and they had the family said, oh look, Australians, you know, and they were probably in Australia, I think, and they had some Aussie football players, and they were going up against these couple of Japanese girls, and they were having this eating competition to see how much they could eat, and how in a set time, right? And so they're just pushing food into their faces, you know. And some of you guys will know those sorts of eating competitions are pretty popular in Japan. You know, I think there's a hot dog eating records held by a Japanese guy or something, isn't it? But just, it's sort of cringy again, because, you know, some people object to those things because it's pretty rude when you got some people in the world starving and don't have enough food to eat, and then you got these other people that are just wasting food by jamming it down their throats, you know. But that, again, that's a really popular odd genre on Japanese TV, you know, really quite popular. So you can see it goes on and on. One leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, doesn't it? So we're actually going to do a few more videos like this, because over the years there's often been odd things that we wanted to show you. And like, for example, our friends, the girls in the school uniforms and the wool vests. In the old days we would have showed you, but these days YouTube's just too touchy about stuff like that, you know. And there's a few vindictive people on the internet too who'll see a video like that, know there's nothing wrong with it, but flag it anyway and cause us dramas. So we just avoid that altogether. So there's a few different things like that we thought, oh, that'd be a good video. Oh, I better not do it. That happens quite a lot. So the way to get around it will be this, just explaining it to you, you know. So we'll try to keep those disgusting images for the beginning of the video, shall we? And change the topic at the end. So anyway, that's enough odd stuff. So within the next 2 minutes from turning off the camera, no doubt, we'll see some more odd stuff. So I'll tell you about that later. More videos coming soon.